Goryeo, also known as Koryё, was a Korean dynasty established in 918 by King Taejo. This kingdom later gave name to the modern exonym, Korea. It united the later three kingdoms in 936 and ruled most of the Korean Peninsula until it was removed by the founder of the Joseon in 1392. Goryeo expanded Korea's borders to present-day Wonsan in the northeast, the Yalu River, and finally almost the whole of the Korean Peninsula. Two of this period's most notable products are celadon pottery and the Tripitaka Koreana, the Buddhist canon carved onto more than 80,000 wood blocks, and stored at Haeinsa. The people of Goryeo also created the world's first metal movable type in 1234. The oldest surviving metal movable type book, the Jigji, was printed in 1377. In 668, Silla conquered Baekje and Goryeo with an alliance with Tang China, but by the late 9th century it was tottering, its monarchs being unimaginative and pressed by the power of powerful statesmen. Many robbers and outlaws agitated, and in 900 Joseon revolted from Silla control in the Yalu region as the state of later Baekje. The year after, Gongmin revolted from the northern regions as Taebong. A son of a regional lord, Joseon, joined Taebong as a general. Taebong fell when Joseon revolted and killed Gongmin in 918. He was crowned Taejo of Goryeo in June of the same year. Silla was overpowered by Goryeo and later Baekje and surrendered to Goryeo in 935. In 936, later Baekje surrendered and Goryeo subsequently maintained an unbroken dynasty that ruled Korea for 474 years. Although the government was controlled by military regime leaders between 1170 and 1270, by the late 13th century, Goryeo had lost much of its power due to the Mongols and the Yuan dynasty. Although King Gongmin managed to free his kingdom from the Yuan overlordship in the mid-14th century, General Yi Seonggi revolted and overthrew King Gongmin in 1392, establishing himself as Taejo of Joseon. Gongmin was killed in 1394. Etymology. The name Goryeo is derived from Goryeo, one of the three kingdoms of Korea. Goryeo changed its name to Goryeo during the reign of King Jangsu in the 5th century. The English name Korea derives from Goryeo. History. Background. Silla, which had accomplished an incomplete unification of the three kingdoms of Korea in 668, weakened and lost control over local lords during the end of the 9th century. The country entered a period of civil war and rebellion led by Gongmin, Ghwon, Jang-il, and Joseon. Gongmin established the state of later Goryeo, renamed Taebong and Majan. Joseon established later Baekje. Together with the now declining Silla, they are known as the later Three Kingdoms. Founding. Wangjeon, later Taejo of Goryeo, a descendant of a Goryeo merchant family of Songdo, joined Taebong as a general but later overthrew Gongmin and established the state of Goryeo in 918 as the successor to Goryeo. Goryeo adopted a Silla-friendly, later Baekje hostile stage during the later Three Kingdoms, but in 927, Goryeo was defeated by later Baekje in present-day Daegu, and King Taejo lost his most able supporters in the battle. For 3 years after, later Baekje dominated the later Three Kingdoms, but after a defeat at Andong in 930, it lost its power. The later Three Kingdoms era ended when Goryeo annexed Silla in 935 and defeated later Baekje in 936. King Taejo moved the capital to his hometown of Kaesong. and ruled the Korean Peninsula as the first king of Goryeo. Koryё married a daughter of the Silla, a royal family, and allowed most of the nobility to keep the lands, even though he ruled the United Nation for only 7 years before his son took the throne upon his death. The succession was not challenged. In 937, 1 year after the unification of the later three kingdoms, the last crown prince of Bali fled to Goryeo, where he was warmly welcomed and included into the ruling family by Wang Jeon, thus unifying the two successor nations of Goryeo. Political structure. The terminology used in the court of Goryeo was that of an empire, not of a kingdom. The capital, Goryeo, was called Hwangdo, imperial capital, and the palace was referred to as imperial palace. The nation also utilized a system of multiple capitals. Goryeo is the main capital, and Seoul, modern Pyongyang, Namgyong, modern Seoul, and Dongyang, modern Gyeongju, as secondary capitals. The mere use of this system and the nomenclature use of the character implied that Goryeo functioned internally as an empire. Other terms, such as Your Imperial Majesty, Empress, Imperial Crown Prince, Empress Dowager, and Imperial Ordinance also suggest that Goryeo adopted the title system of an empire. However, Goryeo, when enshrining its rulers, did not use the title Emperor. Instead, the title of Great King was used to posthumously enshrine Goryeo monarchs. When enshrining its rulers, however, it did use temple names such as Koryё. This is a practice kingdoms did not take part in. Imperial titles, like Emperor or Emperor of the East of the Sea, were also used. The Song and Liao dynasties of China tolerated Goryeo imperial claims and practices. In contrast, after the Mongol invasions, all of these terms were prohibited by Mongol rulers, and Goryeo monarchs were forced to insert the character loyal into the posthumous enshrinement names. This is why the monarchs after Wonsan had this character in the posthumous names until Gongmin. As Mongol power diminished, rulers no longer used but still were unable to restore the use of the temple name. In order to strengthen the power of the central government, Gwangjong, the fourth emperor, made a series of laws, including that of freeing slaves in 958 and one creating the exam for hiring civil officials. To assert power internationally, Gwangjong also proclaimed Goryeo an empire independent from any other country of its day. The fifth king, Jeongjong, launched land ownership reformation called the Junsigwa, and the sixth king, Seongjong, appointed officials to local areas which were previously succeeded by the lords. Between 993 and 1019, the Goryeo-Khatan War ravaged the northern border. By the time of 11th king, Munjong, the central government of Goryeo has gained complete authority and power over local lords. Munjong and later kings emphasized the importance of civilian control of the military. Khatan invasions and Jurchen expedition. The Jurchens in the Yalu River region were tributaries of Goryeo since the reign of Wang Jeon, who called upon them during the wars of the later Three Kingdoms period. But the Jurchens switched allegiance between Liao and Goryeo multiple times, taking advantage of the tension between the two nations, posing a potential threat to Goryeo's border security. The Jurchens offered tribute to the Goryeo court, expecting lavish gifts in return. According to the Goryeo, in 918, the ancient capital of Pyongyang had been in ruins for a long time, and foreign barbarians were using the surrounding lands as hunting grounds and occasionally raiding the borders of Goryeo. Therefore, Wang Jian ordered his subjects to repopulate the ancient capital, and soon sent his cousin Wang Goryeo to defend it. In 993, the Khitan Liao dynasty invaded Goryeo northwest border with an estimated 800,000 troops. After a military stalemate, the Goryeo diplomat Xiao Hui negotiated with the chief Liao general and reached a settlement. In the settlement, Goryeo agreed to end its alliance with Song China, to adopt Liao's calendar, and to become a Liao tributary state. Xiao Hui negotiated and obtained Liao consent to incorporate the land between the border of Liao and Goryeo up to the Yalu River, which was at the time occupied by troublesome Jurchen tribes, citing that in the past the land belonged to Goryeo, the predecessor to Goryeo. With this settlement the Liao withdrew, but Goryeo continued to communicate with the Song, having strengthened its defenses by building a fortress in the newly gained northern territories. In 1009, General Gangzhou of Goryeo led a coup against King Mokjong, killing him and establishing military rule. The Liao attacked with 400,000 troops in 1010, claiming to avenge the murdered Mokjong. Gangzhou blocked the Liao's first attack, but he was defeated in the second one and was executed. King Yonjong of Goryeo was forced to flee the capital, which was sacked and burnt by the Khitan, to Naju temporarily. Unable to establish a foothold and fearing a counterattack by the regrouped Korean armies, the Khitan forces withdrew. Afterward, the Goryeo king sued for peace, but the Liao emperor demanded that he come in person and also cede key border areas. The Goryeo court refused the demands, resulting in a decade of hostility between the two nations, during which both sides fortified the borders in preparation of war. Liao attacked Goryeo in 1015, 1016, and 1017, but the results were indecisive. In 1018, Liao assembled an army of 100,000 troops to invade Goryeo. In preparation, General Gangam Chan ordered a stream to the east of Hengjin to be dammed. When the Khitan troops crossed the Yalu River, Gangam Chan opened the dam and attacked the enemy troops with 12,000 mounted troops, catching them by surprise, inflicting severe losses, and cutting off the line of retreat. The Khitan troops soldiered on and headed toward the capital, but were met with stiff resistance and constant attacks, and were forced to retreat back north. Gangam Chan and his troops waited at Gwiju and surrounded the Khitan, annihilating most of them. Barely a few thousand Liao troops survived after the Battle of Gwiju. In the late summer of 1019, the Liao assembled another large army, both sides recognizing the difficulty of achieving a decisive victory. King Yonjong sent a tributary mission to the Liao in 1020 and Emperor Shengzong graciously pardoned him. After that, the tributary relationship between Goryeo and Liao was resumed and Goryeo suspended its relationship with the Song. Goryeo had no more conflicts with the Liao state, and Goryeo no longer feared Liao. Beginning in the 1030s, Goryeo resumed unofficial contacts with Song and received hundreds of merchant ships each year. However, Goryeo was viewed with apprehension by some in the Song court. In addition, Goryeo was considered the only state not to be conquered by Liao, and was thought to be feared by Liao. After Goryeo's victories over Liao, Goryeo experienced a golden age that lasted a century, during which there were great developments in printing and publishing, promoting learning and dispersing knowledge on philosophy, literature, religion, and science. By 1100, there were 12 universities that produced famous scholars and scientists. In 1087, the first version of the Tripitaka Koreana was completed after many years of labor. The Jurchens north of Goryeo had traditionally rendered tribute to the Goryeo monarchs and called Goryeo their parent country, but but thanks to the defeat of Liao in 1018, the Wanyan tribe of the Hai Shui Mohe unified the Jurchen tribes and gained in might. In 1107, General Yun Guan led a newly formed army, a force of approximately 17,000 men called the Baal Muban, and attacked the Jurchen. Though the war lasted for several years, the Jurchen were ultimately defeated, and surrendered to Yun Guan. To mark the victory, General Yun built 9 fortresses to the northeast of the border. In 1108, however, General Yun was given orders to withdraw his troops by the new ruler, King Yejong. Due to manipulation and court intrigue from opposing factions, he was discharged from his post. Opposition factions fought to ensure the new fortresses were turned over to the Jurchen. During the reign of Jurchen leader Wu Yashu in 1103 to 1113, the border between the two nations was stabilized and Korean forces withdrew from Jurchen territories, acknowledging Jurchen control over the contested region. To defend against the Jurchens and Kittens, a long wall was built by Goryeo in 1033 to 1034. Past struggles. The House Yi of Inju married women to the kings from the time of Munjong to the 17th king, Injong. Eventually the House of Yi gained more power than the monarch himself. This led to the coup of Yi Yajayim in 1126. It failed, but the power of the monarch was weakened. Goryeo underwent a civil war among the nobility. In 1135, Maya Cheong argued in favor of moving the capital to Seoyong. This proposal divided the nobles. One faction, led by Maya Cheong, believed in moving the capital to Pyongyang and expanding into Manchuria. The other one, led by Kim Bu-sik, wanted to keep the status quo. Maya Cheong failed to persuade the king. He rebelled and established the state of Debang, but it failed and he was killed. Military regime. Although Goryeo was founded by the military, its authority was in decline. In 1014, a coup occurred, but the effects of the rebellion didn't last long, only making generals discontent with the current supremacy of the civilian officers. In addition, under the reign of King Weijong, the military officers were prohibited from entering the Security Council, and even at times of state emergency, they were not allowed to assume commands. After political chaos, Weijong started to enjoy traveling to local temples and studying sutra, while he was almost always accompanied by a large group of civilian officers. The military officers were largely ignored and were even mobilized to construct temples and ponds. In 1170, a group of army officers led by Zhang Yongbu, Yi Uibang and Yigo launched a coup d'etat and succeeded. King Weijong went into exile and King Maongjong was placed on the throne. Effective power, however, lay with a succession of generals who used an elite guard unit known as the Tabang to control the throne. Military rule of Goryeo had begun. In 1179, the young general Jeong Dae-sung rose to power and began an attempt to restore the full power of the monarch and purge the corruption of the state. However, he died in 1183 and was succeeded by Yi Uimin, who came from a noble background. His unrestrained corruption and cruelty led to a coup by General Cho Chung-heon, who assassinated Yi Uimin and took supreme power in 1197. For the next 61 years, the Cho house ruled as military dictators, maintaining the kings as puppet monarchs. Cho Chung-heon was succeeded in turn by his son Cho-yu, his grandson Cho-hang and his great-grandson Cho-ui. When he took control, Cho Chung forced Maongjong off the throne and replaced him with King Sinjong. What was different from former military leaders was the active involvement of scholars in Cho's control, notably Prime Minister Yi Wyu-bo, who was a Confucian scholar official. After Sinjong died, Cho forced his son to the throne as Huizong. After 7 years, Huizong led a revolt but failed. Then, Chou found the pliable King Gojong instead. Although the House of Chou established strong private individuals loyal to it, continuous invasion by the Khitan and Mongols ravaged the whole land, resulting in a weakened defensibility, and also the power of the military regime waned. Mongol invasions and Yuan domination. Fleeing from the Mongols, in 1216 the Khitans invaded Goryeo and defeated the Korean armies multiple times, even reaching the gates of the capital and raiding deep into the south, but were defeated by Korean General Kim Chwi, who pushed them back north to Pyongyang, where the remaining Khitans were finished off by allied Mongol Goryeo forces in 1219. In 1231, Mongols under Rogadee Khan invaded Goryeo following the aftermath of joint Goryeo-Mongol forces against the Khitans in 1219. The royal court moved to Gangwon-do in the Bay of Gyeonggi in 1232. The military ruler of the time, Choyu, insisted on fighting back. Goryeo resisted for about 30 years but finally sued for peace in 1259. Meanwhile, the Mongols began a campaign from 1231 to 1259 that ravaged parts of Gyeongsang and Jeolla. There were 6 major campaigns: 1231, 1232, 1235, 1238, 1247, 1253. Between 1253 and 1258, the Mongols under Mongke Khan's general Jalaitai Korchi launched 4 devastating invasions in the final successful campaign against Korea, at tremendous cost to civilian lives throughout the Korean Peninsula. Civilian resistance was strong, and the imperial court at Gangwon attempted to strengthen its fortress. Korea won several victories, but the Korean military could not withstand the waves of invasions. The repeated Mongol invasions caused havoc, loss of human lives and famine in Korea. In 1236, Gojong ordered the recreation of the Tripitaka Koreana, which was destroyed during the 1232 invasion. This collection of Buddhist scriptures took 15 years to carve on some 81,000 wooden blocks, and is preserved to this day. In March 1258, the dictator Choi was assassinated by Kim Jun. Thus, dictatorship by his military group was ended, and the scholars who had insisted on peace with Mongolia gained power. Eventually, the scholars sent an envoy to the Mongols, and a peace treaty was contracted between the Mongol Empire and Goryeo. Some military officials who refused to surrender formed the Sambyol-cho rebellion and resisted in the islands off the southern shore of the Korean Peninsula. After 1270, Goryeo became a semi-autonomous client state of the Yuan dynasty. The Mongols and the Kingdom of Goryeo tied with marriages, and Goryeo became coup de vassal of the Yuan dynasty for about 80 years, and monarchs of Goryeo were mainly imperial sons-in-law. The kings of Goryeo held an important status like other important families of Mardan, the Uyghurs and Mongols. It is claimed that one of Goryeo monarchs was the most beloved grandson of Kublai Khan. The Goryeo dynasty survived under the Yuan until King Gongmin began to push the Mongolian garrisons of the Yuan back in the 1350s. By 1356, Goryeo regained its lost northern territories. Last reform. When King Gongmin ascended to the throne, Goryeo was under the influence of the Mongol Yuan China. He was forced to spend many years at the Yuan court, being sent there in 1341 as a virtual prisoner before becoming king. He married the Mongol princess Queen Nogak. But in the mid-14th century the Yuan was beginning to crumble, soon to be replaced by the Ming dynasty in 1368. King Gongmin began efforts to reform the Goryeo government and remove Mongolian influences. His first act was to remove all pro-Mongol aristocrats and military officers from the positions. Mongols had annexed the northern provinces of Goryeo after the invasions and incorporated them into their empire as the Sangseong and Dongyeong prefectures. The Goryeo army retook these provinces partly thanks to defection from Yi Jachin, a minor Korean official in service of Mongols in Sangseong, and his son Yi Seonggi. In addition, generals Yi Seonggi and Ji Yongsu led a campaign into Liaoyang. After the death of Gongmin's wife Noguk in 1365, he fell into depression. In the end, he became indifferent to politics and entrusted that great task to the Buddhist monk Shindon. But after 6 years, Shindon lost his position. In 1374, Gongmin was killed by Cho Manzang and others. During this tumultuous period, Goryeo momentarily conquered Liaoyang in 1356, repulsed 2 large invasions by the Red Turbans in 1359 and 1360, and defeated the final attempt by the Yuan to dominate Goryeo when General Cho Yong defeated an invading Mongol Tumen in 1364. During the 1380s, Goryeo turned its attention to the Wokou menace and used naval artillery created by Cho Museon to annihilate hundreds of pirate ships. Fall in 1388, King Yu and General Cho Yong planned a campaign to invade present-day Liaoning of China. King Yu put the General Yi Seonggi in charge, but he stopped at the border and rebelled. Goryeo fell to General Yi Seonggi, a son of a Yachun, who put to death the last 3 Goryeo kings, usurped the throne and established in 1392 to the Joseon dynasty. Foreign relations. During the 10th century, the Khitans tried to establish relations with Goryeo at least on 2 occasions. In 942, the Khitan ruler Taeju sent an embassy with a gift of 50 camels to Goryeo, but Taeju refused them, banishing the envoys and starving the camels to death. Goryeo had maintained relations with most of the 5 dynasties and southern kingdoms in China. By 962, formal relations were established with the Song dynasty. Relations with Song were close, with many embassies being exchanged between Goryeo and Song, but relations would be interrupted by the rise of the Liao and Jin dynasties. After about 30 years of peace, the Khitans invaded Goryeo. After several military campaigns, a state of peace was established in 1020. For around 100 years, the Far East was relatively peaceful and Munjong strengthened the Liao-Song-Goryeo line. In 1102, the Jurchen threatened and another crisis emerged. In 1115 the Jurchen founded the Jin dynasty, and in 1125 Jin annihilated Liao, which was Goryeo suzerain, and started invasion of Song. In response to the circumstantial changes, Goryeo declared itself to be a vassal state of Jin in 1126. After that, peace was maintained and Jin never actually did invade Goryeo. Tension continued through the 12th century and into the 13th century, when the Mongol invasion started. After a series of battles, Goryeo capitulated to the Mongols, with the direct dynastic rule of Goryeo monarchy. Economy. Commerce in the Goryeo dynasty. Trade was frequent. In the start of the dynasty, Byokrando was the main port. Byokrando was a port close to the Goryeo capital. Trade included